The Wannsee Conference, a turning point in history.
Anti-Semitism is the prejudice and intense dislike for Jewish people. Evidence of Jews in the area known as Germany dates back to the early 4th century. By the 8th century, Jews were flourishing among the German tribes along the banks of the Rhine. Jews could hold public office, own land, and work in whatever industries they chose. They spoke the same languages and often had the same names as Germans. Many Germans even converted to Judaism. Anti-Semitism goes far back in history to the 11th century. During this time, thousands of Jews in German towns were massacred at the hands of German Christian crusaders. Throughout the Jews' time in this country, they found their homes attacked, their cemeteries desecrated, and their synagogues burned. Also, in the 1800s, anti-Semitic incidents grew in number and violence. There were anti-Jewish riots led by a group that had their slogan as, "Death and destruction to all Jews." In 1881, an anti-Semitites petition was sent to the leader of the country demanding that Jews be removed from the government and that no more Jews should be allowed to come to Germany. Hitler and the Young Nazi Party tried to take over the government in 1923. Hitler said, "The Jew forms the strongest contrast to the Aryan. The Jewish people is without true culture. The fake culture the Jew possesses is the property of other people. The Jew is a maggot, parasite, vermin, plague, spider sucking blood, vampire, pimp, snake, and that is far from all," he said. The effects of the propaganda, combined with the anti-Semitic feelings that already existed in Europe, resulted in a widespread ridicule, violence, humiliation, and persecution of Jews. Nazi propaganda and hatred against the Jews set the stage for mass genocide. In 1923, millions of people were without work, but even if they had jobs, there was little they could afford to buy. The German Reichsmark, their unit of money, had almost no value. The Jews were blamed for the economical depression that Germany was going through at the time because they were taking up too many jobs that other non-Jews could have. Adolf Hitler thought of Jews as a race rather than a religion. He believed that Jews could not be redeemed by converting to Christianity. He thought Jews had a rootless for seeking to undermine Germany from within. Hitler came up with the Aryan race, which consisted of people with blonde hair and blue eyes. He suggested that those should be the only people in the world. Hitler did not consider the mass murder of Jews to be a human suffering. He thought of it as a worthwhile way of making Germany a better place. Hitler became Chancellor on January 30th, 1933. The two men who had given Hitler power could not control him because he wanted absolute power. It took Hitler only 18 days to dispose of the Weimar Republic. Germany had then accepted Hitler's dictatorship. He was the president and chancellor. Hitler had a huge effect on Jews when he was out in power. During Hitler's first year in power, a record number of Jews committed suicide or fled Germany. Adolf Hitler blamed Jews for Germany's depressed economy and Germany's loss in World War I. He hated anyone who he felt was inferior, which included mentally disabled, Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals. After Hitler gained power, he had the constructions of ghettos take place. A ghetto is a part of a city, especially a slum area, occupied by a minority group or groups. Ghettos were created first because nearly all of Europe's Jews were in Germany. There were 5 million of them total. Second, the land area was vast. Third, Eastern Germany had a history of anti-Semitism of which the Germans were all well aware of. It is said that the creation of ghettos is obviously only a temporary measure. For the time being, the ghettos would hold the Jews until the Nazis were ready to go on with the next stage. The first concentration camps probably came into being because the existing jails were too small to hold all the large number of people arrested by the Nazis. The camps turned into huge slave labor enterprises. They were thought to be extermination through work. The reason was a basic, simple one. What they could produce would help them win the war, but one of the primary goals of the war itself was the extermination of Jews. On January 20th, 1942, 15 high-ranking Nazi Party and German government officials gathered at a villa in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee to discuss and coordinate the implementation of what they called the final solution of the Jewish question.
I further order you to submit to me as soon as possible an overall plan showing the measures for organization and action necessary to carry out the desired final solution of the Jewish question.
Despite the euphemisms which appeared in the protocols of the meeting, the aim of the Wannsee Conference was clear to its participants: to further the coordination of a policy aimed at the physical annihilation of the European Jews. The SS and the police had already negotiated agreements with the German Army High Command on the murder of civilians, including the Soviet Jews, in the spring of 1941, prior to the invasion of the Soviet Union. In late September 1941, Hitler had authorized the Reich Railroad to transport to German, Austrian, and Czech Jews to the location in German-occupied Poland and the German-occupied Soviet Union, where German authorities would kill the overwhelming majority. The Wannsee Conference involved 15 people that gathered at a villa in the Berlin suburb Wannsee. The top-ranking Nazi party and German government leaders gathered for the meeting. Nazi civil servants, SS officials, and the party representatives were included in the Wannsee Conference. Key non-SS government leaders included secretaries of foreign ministries and Justice Corporation. The Wannsee Conference was put into action as a way to figure out the final solution. Men all needed to be on the same page for the leading death camps and methods of killing and working. The Nuremberg laws, as they became known, did not define a Jew as someone with particular religious beliefs. Instead, anyone who had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents was defined as a Jew, regardless of whether that individual identified himself or herself as a Jew or belonged to the Jewish religious community. Many Germans who had not practiced Judaism for years found themselves caught in the grip of Nazi terror. Even people with Jewish grandparents who had converted to Christianity were defined as Jews. Reinhard Heydrich played a major role in the Wannsee Conference. He led the Wannsee Conference. Heydrich called everyone to the Wannsee Conference. He came up with the ideas that were discussed at the Wannsee Conference. Many topics were discussed during the Wannsee Conference. Methods of killing was one important subject they talked about. They discussed liquidation and extermination. The members of the Wannsee Conference did not deliberate on whether it should take place or not. They simply discussed the implementation of a policy decision that had already been made at the highest level of Nazi regime. None of the officials at the Wannsee Conference objected to the final solution policy that Reinhard Heydrich proposed. Jews were also put to many restrictions. Jewish children were barred from public schools. It was claimed to be because schools were crowded. Jews also were forbidden to own farmland, forbidden from working as a newspaper editor. Jews were removed from any area and influence in the German national community. The Wannsee Conference was a methodical blueprint for murder. It did not mark the start of the final solution. Mobile killing squads were already slaughtering Jews in occupied Soviet Union. Wannsee Conference was the place where the final solution was formally revealed to non-Nazi leaders. The Wannsee Conference is a code name for a systematic, deliberate physical annihilation of all the European Jews. Most of the world did not know about the Wannsee Conference. Nazi tried to keep the Wannsee Conference a secret from the outside world. The term final solution was used to hide the Nazis' policy of mass murder. The only people that knew about the Wannsee Conference were party leaders, the SS, the security police. However, word got out about the Wannsee Conference and the final solution. Jews were not executed, killed, or murdered. They were resettled, which meant the removal, evacuation, and deportation of Jews. A huge decrease in the European population due to the Wannsee Conference and the final solution. 6 million Jews were killed by the concentration camps and death camp marches that were put into place after the conference.
Within the framework of the final solution, the Jews must be transferred to the east under appropriate guard and assigned to the appropriate work service. Able-bodied Jews, separated by sex, will be brought into work gangs to those territories to build roads.
Immediately after the Wannsee Conference, Jews were placed in ghettos. Jews were packed in cattle cars as they were being deported to concentration camps. Families were torn apart as soon as they arrived at the camps. Jews were assessed by doctors whether they were fit enough to go to work. Some were sent straight to extermination. Young children were eliminated right away since their youth made them unable to participate in manual labor. Jews also worked to death in concentration camps. Treatment in camps had to do with the age and gender. Men and women and young adolescents and elderly people were all treated differently. For example, this quote demonstrates how children were treated.
Children of tender years were invariably exterminated since because of their youth they were unable to work.
Those declared unfit for life included old men, mentally and physically unstable, pregnant women, and children. Gender was also a major contribution to how Jews and others were treated in concentration camps. Women and men were separated upon entering the camps. Also, women were more likely to be exterminated first because Nazis considered them to be weaker than men, so they could not work in fields as sufficiently as men could. Some ways inmates were punished where the most feeble were made to do knee bends and push-ups until they collapsed. 2 or 3 Jews would be ordered to play tag, and the ones tagged would be killed. Selections for the gas chambers took place at more or less regular intervals. Many SS doctors in the camps used inmates as laboratory animals to try to make a German super race. Jews were killed by the gas chambers, tested and experimented on by the doctors of the camps. The inmates were also worked to death, starved, dehydrated, and just murdered for doing something the Nazis didn't approve of. Most of the German civilians knew little about the death camps as they were not located on German soil and were constructed and operated with a degree of secrecy. Victims taken by the camps went up astronomically. The Nazis and those in the Wannsee Conference set up a way for Nazis to kill Jews without making it known all around. Key denial and assertions towards the final solution are that the murder of approximately 6 million Jews during World War II never occurred, and that the Nazis had no official policy or intention to exterminate the Jews. Denial and distortion are generally motivated by the hatred of Jews and built on the claim that the Holocaust was invented or exaggerated by Jews as part of the plot to advance Jewish interests.
Barbarous ancient legend that whenever a just person dies, God sheds 2 tears. And when they fall into the ocean, they reverberate throughout the universe. And I say to myself, if God does that for one just person, how many tears did he shed for all these men and women and children, my God, and the children who are just and innocent and beautiful? Who heard them? Do we hear them now?
We hear them now.
The Wannsee Conference is a turning point in history because it is the meeting that put the final solution into action and finalized that the answer to the Jewish question is exterminating all the Jews in European countries.